Get paid on Friday, feel that tiny rush when the direct deposit hits, and for about 5 minutes you breathe. Then rent pulls out. Your car insurance auto-pays. You grab groceries, fill up the gas tank once, maybe grab a cheap meal because you're exhausted. By Monday night, you open your banking app and think, how is there almost nothing left already? I didn't even do anything crazy. If that feels uncomfortably familiar, this video is for you. Because budgeting on minimum wage or a low income in America is not the same game as budgeting when you're making 80 or 100 grand a year. I want to say this clearly before we go any further. If you're working and the math still doesn't add up, you are not crazy and you're not lazy. There are big forces in the background here. Rent, food, gas, healthcare, all of it has gotten more expensive in a lot of places faster than wages have risen. I'm Dylan from Dylan Investments. Money talks, I translate it for you. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how to budget on minimum wage or low income in a way that doesn't feel like a guilt trip or a math exam. By the time we're done, my goal is that you see your money more clearly, have a simple way to organize it, and feel just a little more in control, even if your income doesn't magically triple next month. Let's start with something a lot of traditional budgeting advice gets wrong. Most of it is written for people who have plenty of money and just spend it on the wrong stuff. That's not you. Your problem isn't, I can't stop ordering $16 cocktails on Friday. Your problem is rent, food, gas, phone, electric, maybe childcare, and I have just enough to maybe cover those and nothing else. Here's where this gets interesting. When your income is low, budgeting stops being about perfection and becomes about survival order. Think of it less like a perfect monthly spreadsheet and more like a ranking system for your dollars. You're asking, when this paycheck shows up, in what order should these dollars do their jobs so my life doesn't fall apart? I like to use a simple picture in my head. Imagine every single dollar you earn is a little worker that clocks in and asks you, "Boss, what's my job?" That dollar can only do one job. It can be rent, or it can be gas, or it can be groceries, or it can be debt. But it cannot be all four. A budget, especially on a low income, is just you deciding which jobs absolutely must get filled first. To make this less abstract, let me tell you about a guy I know. We'll call him Alex. Alex works at a big box retail store, 28 to 30 hours a week, plus a little side shift at a fast food place. After taxes, he's bringing in something like $1,500 to $1,600 a month. He lives with a roommate, drives an older car, and doesn't buy fancy stuff. And yet, every single month, he feels like he's drowning. When we sat down at his kitchen table and actually wrote things down, the picture became clearer. Rent and utilities with his roommate took about $700. His car insurance and gas averaged around $300. Groceries were $250 on a good month. His phone bill was $70. That's already $1,320. On top of that, he had a minimum payment on an old credit card and the random life happen stuff like a new work shirt, a doctor copay, or his mom needing help with a bill. Here's where things quietly go wrong for someone like Alex. None of those numbers look insane on their own. But when you put them in order and line them up with when his paychecks hit, the timing is brutal. He gets paid every other Friday. His big bills are due in the first 10 days of the month. So, the first paycheck after rent hits gets absolutely hammered. And by the time he gets to week 3, he's limping along on fumes and impulse spending because he's exhausted and stressed. So what does a budget even mean in that world? Here's how I like to think about it. First, you need a clear picture of what's actually happening, not what you wish was happening. That means, for 1 month, you write down every bill and every expense as if you were filming a documentary about your money. Not to judge yourself, just to see the real movie instead of the trailer. If you only remember one idea from this video, make it this: awareness beats perfection. On a low income, you don't have the luxury of playing pretend with your money. The numbers are too tight. Every dollar has to be seen, counted, and told where to go, or it just disappears into the cracks. Next, I want you to look at your bills and split them mentally into 2 groups: non-negotiables and everything else. Non-negotiables are the things that keep you alive and able to work. Usually that's shelter, basic food, basic transportation, essential utilities, and a basic phone plan, because everything from job applications to banking is on your phone now. Everything else might still be important, but it's negotiable when times are tight. Let's go back to Alex. We listed his non-negotiables as rent and utilities, groceries, gas, basic car insurance, and his phone. That was his survival budget. When we totaled just those, it came out to about $1,200 a month. That meant in practice he had maybe $300 to $400 of flexible money, which wasn't really flexible because it had to cover debt minimums, small emergencies, and anything fun. Now, here's where this gets real. When you see that survival number, you might realize something painful. Even at your best, the math leaves you with almost nothing left. That is a gut punch. It can feel like, what's the point of budgeting if there's nothing to work with? I hear you, but this is also where you start to get your power back. Because the budget is not going to magically make money appear. What it does is make sure the money you do have doesn't get silently stolen by timing and chaos. So let's talk about timing, because timing is a silent killer on a low income. A lot of people I talk to don't just have a money problem, they have a calendar problem. Their paychecks show up on one schedule, and their bills are due on another. Companies know this. Late fees, overdraft fees, reconnection fees, those are entire business models. If you've ever been hit with a $35 overdraft because your bill came out one day before your paycheck, you know exactly what I mean. This is the part most people never see. You actually have more power to move dates and structure than you think. With Alex, the first thing we did was call his phone company and car insurance and move his due dates closer to the paycheck that still had some room. Most companies will shift your due date once or twice a year, if you ask. It doesn't sound like much, but just shifting one or two bills can stop that domino effect where one overdraft fee triggers three more. Now let's talk about pay frequency. A lot of minimum wage and low-income jobs pay weekly or every other week. That means thinking in months can actually mess with your brain. Instead, it can be way more helpful to think in paychecks. Ask yourself, what is the one main job of this specific paycheck? With Alex, we gave each paycheck a headline. The first check of the month was keep the roof and lights on. That check was mostly for rent and utilities. The second check was keep the wheels moving and food in the kitchen. That one covered gas, groceries, and his phone bill. Then whatever tiny bit was left from each check went into a separate bucket we labeled Freedom Buffer. Even if it was $10, it went there. Here's where it gets interesting again. Most budgeting advice loves to throw around big percentages. Save 20%, put 30% to this, 50% to that. On a low income, that's usually nonsense. You might not be able to save 20%. You might barely save 2%. But 2% is still forward movement. $10 or $20 per paycheck is still something. The goal at first is not to hit some ideal ratio. The goal is to prove to yourself that you can create a tiny gap between what you earn and what you spend. Let me give you another mini story. I have a friend, we'll call him Jason. He was convinced he absolutely could not save anything. He worked fast food, made just above minimum wage, and paid rent to his cousin to sleep in a spare room. When we went through his bank statements together, we noticed something. He had 4 different subscription services he barely used, a couple of streaming platforms, a music app, and some random free trial that had turned into a monthly charge. Now, none of those were huge on their own. $7 here, $10 there. But together, they were about $45 a month. For Jason, that was gas for a week or a starter emergency fund after a couple of months. Once he saw that, it clicked. He canceled 3 of them, kept the one he actually used, and decided every dollar he had just freed up would live in a separate savings pocket labeled emergency buffer, not in his main checking. So what does that actually mean for you? It means there are usually 2 battles happening at once. The big, structural battle of low wages versus high costs, and the smaller, but still important battle of leaks and timing. You may not be able to win the big battle in a week, but you can start winning the smaller one. That's what your budget is for. Let's go one level deeper into how you can actually set this up without making your brain explode. If I were sitting at your kitchen table, here's where I'd start. I'd grab a piece of paper and write down the dates you get paid for the next month or 2. Then I'd write down the due dates of all your bills. I'd draw little arrows from each paycheck to the bills it needs to cover. And I'd keep doing that until every non-negotiable bill had a paycheck assigned to it. At that point, you'll see something powerful. You'll either see that each paycheck has some small room left, or you'll see that even assigning every paycheck still doesn't cover everything. Both are useful. If there's a tiny bit of room, that's where you carve out your freedom buffer. If there's no room, that's a signal, not a failure, but that something big needs to change. Maybe it's rent that's too high for your income. Maybe it's a car payment that's crushing you. Maybe it's not enough hours. Here's the twist a lot of people miss. When you're on minimum wage or low income, your budget is not just about cutting back. Sometimes the single most important line in your budget is the one that tells you this life setup is mathematically impossible long term. That can sound depressing, but it's actually clarity. It tells you exactly where to focus your energy when you have the chance. Cheaper housing, a roommate, a different car, a different job, more hours, a side hustle that's sustainable. But let's stay grounded in the present, because I know you might be thinking, that's nice, Dylan, but I can't just snap my fingers and move or get a new job. Totally fair. That's why I like to separate things into right now moves and next level moves. Right now moves are things you can do this month without changing your whole life. Moving due dates, canceling subscriptions, splitting paychecks by job, setting up a basic tracking system. Next level moves are the bigger shifts that might take months or years. New skills, better paying jobs, different living situations. On the right now side, one of the simplest tools for low-income budgeting is the envelope idea, and it works even if you never touch physical cash. The idea is simple. You don't leave all your money sitting in one big pile where it's easy to lose track. You split it into mini piles by purpose. In the old school version, that was literal envelopes: rent, groceries, gas, phones. In the modern version, that could be separate accounts, sub-accounts inside your bank app, or even a note in your digital wallet that says, out of this $400, $200 is already taken by rent, $80 is for gas, the rest is for food. The key is that you decide the job before you spend, not after. When Alex's paycheck hit, we started doing this. He would immediately move a certain amount into a rent and utilities pocket. That money was off limits for anything else. Then he'd move a smaller chunk into gas and groceries. Whatever was left was flex, and even that had a plan. Some small portion was allowed to be fun or comfort spending, because you can't live like a robot. The rest floated into his freedom buffer. Remember that moment when you opened your bank app and felt sick because everything disappeared in 3 days? This is the exact mechanism that protects you from that. The money doesn't vanish because it was already told what job it was going to do and parked in the right place. You're not relying on willpower. You're relying on a system. Now, I want to talk about the emotional side for a second, because budgeting on a low income is not just math, it's feelings. When your income is tight, every bill feels like judgment. You look at your numbers and think, I'm failing. I'm behind. I'm never going to catch up. That shame has a nasty side effect. It makes you avoid looking. And when you avoid looking, the chaos gets worse. Late fees stack up, debt snowballs, and suddenly you're paying extra just to be poor. Here's where it gets really important. I want you to treat your budget like a flashlight, not a report card. A report card is something the world uses to grade you. A flashlight is something you use to see the path, so you don't trip. Your numbers are not a moral score. They're just the current coordinates of your life. If they're not where you want them to be, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means the map is telling you there's work to do and some obstacles in the way. That shift matters because it changes how you talk to yourself. Instead of, I'm terrible with money, you start thinking, I'm learning how money flows in my life. Instead of, I can never save, you think, right now I can save $5 a week, and that's my starting point. Instead of, there's no point in budgeting, you think budgeting is how I stop getting blindsided. Let's touch on irregular hours and income, because minimum wage and low-income work is often unstable. One week you get 38 hours, the next week you're down to 21. That chaos can make budgeting feel impossible. Here's one way to handle it. Build your core budget around the minimum hours you can realistically expect, not the best-case scenario. If you usually get between 20 and 30 hours, plan as if you're getting 20. That way, when you have a heavy week, that extra money doesn't get baked into your normal life. It becomes bonus fuel for your freedom buffer or for tackling one nasty bill. I had another guy I talked to who worked 2 part-time jobs. His income swung up and down constantly, and it stressed him out. When he started treating his hottest weeks as extra instead of normal, his stress went down. On low income, average can be a dangerous word. Anchoring your life to the low end of your income and treating everything above that as bonus gives you more stability, even if the numbers are small. There's another hidden system we should call out: family and social obligations. A lot of people on low incomes also feel pressure to help family, cover emergencies for siblings, send money back home, or always be the one who picks up the tab because you're doing okay. That can quietly wreck a fragile budget. I'm not going to tell you to stop helping people you care about. Relationships matter. But I will say this: you cannot pour from an empty bank account. Setting a boundary around how much you can give each month, even if it's a small fixed amount, is not selfish. It's how you make sure you're able to keep helping long term. So what can that look like? Maybe you decide, I can afford $50 a month for family help or friend emergencies. And that's it. You put that in its own little bucket. If someone needs more than that, you're honest. You say, I wish I could do more, but this is what I can do without putting myself in a hole. That's not being stingy. That's being responsible in a pretty brutal system. Now, let's zoom out again for a second. Remember Alex? After a couple of months of doing this, here's what changed for him. His income was basically the same. His rent didn't go down. Groceries didn't magically get cheaper. But he wasn't getting hit with overdraft fees anymore. His bills weren't bouncing. He had, for the first time in his adult life, a tiny emergency fund of a couple $100. And the biggest change was in his head. He knew when each bill was coming and which paycheck was going to handle it. That meant that when his car battery died one morning, it was still stressful, but it wasn't a full meltdown. He used his freedom buffer to cover most of it, and then adjusted his next grocery run to make up the difference. No payday loan, no overdraft fee spiral, no panic attack. That's the difference a low-income budget can make. Not that life becomes easy, but that every surprise doesn't turn into a catastrophe. Here's where the rehook comes in. Think back to that moment when you open your bank app and feel that wave of dread. The long-term goal of everything we're talking about is to change that feeling. Instead of, oh no, what disaster am I about to see? You start to think, okay, this looks tight, but I know why and I know what's coming next. That shift from confusion to clarity is huge for your stress, your sleep, and your decisions. Let's talk quickly about debt, because it shows up a lot in low-income budgets. If you're on minimum wage and you're buried in credit card debt, I want you to hear this. The system is not neutral. Credit card companies make tons of money off people in your exact situation. Late fees, interest, penalty rates, those aren't accidents. They're business models. So don't beat yourself up for falling into that trap. The question now is how to stop the bleeding. On a low income, the first goal with debt is often just to stabilize it. That means making sure at least the minimums are getting paid each month and you're not adding new charges if you can help it. If you can free up even a small extra amount, you can pick one debt to attack a little harder. But I don't want you starving yourself or skipping rent to make some internet-perfect debt snowball chart look better. Survival bills first, then keeping debt from getting worse, then slowly chipping away when you can. If this made a few things click for you, you might want to save this video and watch it again while you're actually setting up your budget. It's one thing to hear all this in theory, and another to have your numbers in front of you and walk through paycheck by paycheck, bill by bill. Let me be that calm voice at your kitchen table while you do it. And if you're wondering what to learn next, a great follow-up is how to build your very first small emergency fund, even on low income, so that every flat tire and surprise bill doesn't blow up your whole month. That's something I break down in another video, because once you have a budget and a tiny buffer, the game changes again. For now, I want you to remember 3 things. First, your situation is hard, but it is not hopeless, and it is not a personal moral failure. Second, a budget on minimum wage is not about perfection. It's about survival order and clarity. Third, even tiny wins matter. $5 saved, 1 subscription canceled, 1 overdraft fee avoided, 1 bill with a move due date. Those are all plays in your favor. You deserve a life that isn't just spinning from paycheck to paycheck in quiet panic. It might take time, and it might take some tough decisions, but step by step, you can build more stability than you have today. Start by seeing clearly. Then give every dollar a job. Then keep adjusting as you go. You're not behind. You're in progress. I'm Dylan from Dylan Investments. Money talks, and I'll keep translating it for you. Have a good one, my friend.